I had a nightmare about today.
Is this? Are we live?
We're live.
So this is your intro. You had a nightmare.
I had a nightmare.
Are you intrigued, Jason?
About
Dukes?
today.
That's my favorite intro so far to a podcast
What
that I've ever
What
heard.
happened?
You're welcome to take
what
it.
happened in said nightmare?
Okay, well, we're getting ready for this exact interview. You know, a new place to me,
With the world-renowned Jason Dukes.
which I'm very excited about. But my fear was, in my dream, you guys were very tired.
Well, that's kind of true.
I know. It's a nightmare coming true.
Well, we're shockingly mental alert.
Well,
I mean, this is as good as it
but
gets.
here's what was happening is like throughout the interview, like maybe in the first 15 minutes, like you guys kept like leaning back. You got like a pillow, and then all of a sudden a blanket came out of
body
nowhere.
language just
You're like,
isn't
yeah,
there.
just keep going. I'm good. And then you guys were both very much asleep, and I was trying to keep people entertained, and so far everyone's tired, and so my nightmare is like looming in the back of my mind.
Freud would have a heyday on this one. What's all behind this dream/nightmare? The most common one I find is, I've never had this. My wife has it all the time. She's back in college and she's late for like going to a final exam or something.
Yeah, I've never had that one.
Papers due, but you'll hear a lot of people that will have that. But this is sort of a premeditated. Hey,
It's
you're
true.
under a lot of
That was
tension.
like 2 weeks ago too.
It's somewhat prophetic.
So some of Jason, not only are our host, you are our guest today, you're also responsible for easing his blood pressure. So anything you can do to kind of put him at ease and let him know it's all well. So
he's got a soothing voice, to be honest with
he
you.
does. And did you know since 2008 he's been podcasting?
I just found that out.
Actually, before then, it was called something else, and Dukes patented, let's call it podcasting.
Oh,
Yeah, actually,
And he got laughed at by his neighbors, but he caught on to something.
it caught on to it was back when that farming couple in Missouri was doing it, and they were the most popular podcast in the world.
How to grow beans.
Yeah,
And,
shout out to Billy Mitchell though,
yeah.
from the
Mitchell
old
from-
days here in Florida when we lived here, because that's who got me into it.
He's like, listen, you got to get on
You
the
got
ground
to do a
floor.
podcast.
It's cool.
Exactly right. So
Yeah.
well, I'm super excited, and I want to just do a quick intro, if that's okay.
Please.
So that's when like
That'll help.
the music
it'll help
goes.
flush out the dream memories.
That's
for
right.
You.
I don't think I'll go to sleep with 6 shots.
No.
Right? You probably put 2 extra in.
Well, just to be safe, you know. Welcome to another episode of The Sage. We're in a new place, and we have some familiar faces too, and some new faces. I wanted to do a quick introduction. Robert Beckman, we are the champions. Thank you for being
Here
here.
at Beach House Church, we're in the representative Beach House T-shirt. If you're ever in Daytona Beach and you need a place to worship, this is a great group right here.
It is.
Really cool group. If you are, they're very chill.
Super
They
accommodating.
very much fit the beach vibe. I guess if you're very uptight and we're hoping for suits, you have the wrong group. But they're very much family.
Perhaps even the wrong part of the world.
They embrace, again, they embrace the beach vibe. By the way, the pastor here, Charlie West, one of his names in the community is Fisherman Charlie. So he's kind of known as the pastor who's the fisherman.
That's cool.
So,
Let's see-
there's almost some New Testament references we could find.
Yeah,
there
it's like
somewhere.
close
there
to
was-
God.
There was a verse about that.
Yeah, a verse or two about fishing.
We mustn't forget about the smartest man in the room.
Yes.
Producer Paul, thank you for being here.
Yes,
Thank
Paul.
you, Paul.
And I don't know where she went, but also our
Sidekick Annie.
a sidekick Annie. She's done great.
And just to enunciate, not psychic Annie, but
Psychic Annie.
sidekick.
Yeah, we
Annie.
don't believe in that.
Yes,
We don't believe that here.
yes.
We do not
Totally against
condone
that.
or affiliate.
I don't know how long you've been podcasting. We're against that.
Well, wherever
Not
she
since
is, thanks
2008,
for,
I bet.
thanks for being here, wherever she is.
Yes.
Anyway,
okay.
so Robert, who are we talking to today?
Jason Dukes is a Renaissance man before Renaissance men even knew that they existed. He could go pigeon shooting in the morning and then slice up a beautiful salad for lunch. He could start a coffee shop, maybe even do it through his church setting with his church family. And then he could be a former Dove Award winner. I don't think you knew that. I don't think I've dropped
didn't.
bombs here.
I didn't.
He also, increasingly these days, is excited about blockchain and about all the possibilities that are there. So part of the challenge for today is which of the Jason Dukes would we like to hear from? And so we're going to kind of open it up and let you choose which parts you like to share from. But yeah, Jason is an entrepreneurial guy. He's been helpful with what we call reproducingchurches.com network of guys who like to start new stuff. And then, in terms of marketplace, he was marketplace when marketplace wasn't cool. Well, except for the Apostle Paul. He was always doing that too.
He was part of the inspiration.
So, Jason, you're back in a sort of a hometown for you. He planted in the Orlando area many moons ago, is now in the Franklin, Tennessee area. Country is king. And welcome back to Florida. And what are some of the things that you're most excited about right now? What are some projects you got going? You're probably writing an album that I haven't mentioned as well, and you'd rather talk about that today.
Yeah, it's a country and EDM collab with Beyonce, and so I'll let you know when it's coming out.
Country EDM with Beyonce.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
I can't
Wow,
wait. Can you
Beyonce, me, and it's right there.
I can't wait. And by the way, father of 7 children.
Really?
Biological. Like,
No
the man
way.
is very fertile.
Wow. Good.
So for those of you who are interested in that, you need some tips. There you go.
So that's quite an intro.
Happily married to Jen for
I'm
many moons.
I'm curious, like,
How do you
man,
do that?
I mean,
By the way, Thomas and Annie are still in the newlywed
The
stage.
topic of the podcast just pivoted. I'm curious after
So
saying
then
I
the
have
rest,
7
the rest of the hour we focus totally on how to have babies.
oh man.
And we're like, wow, that took a turn. I didn't see that coming.
You've done quite a lot. And so when Robert says Renaissance man, how does that strike you?
Well, it's funny. Probably one of the most popular things I've ever written was an article back a few years ago called the Second Renaissance and the Decentralized Revolution. And I love the Renaissance. It was actually something when I was in school I studied a lot. I don't often get called Renaissance man, but Robert is quite
Nailed it.
expressive in his description. So, but yeah, I love a lot of things, and so probably I'm not an expert in anything. Maybe except pancake making and popcorn making. That's the only 2 things my kids say, but they question my dad joke expertise. But all of that, like, I'm kind of just okay in a lot of things, right? So just got curious is probably the better way to describe it. So
Interesting. Well, we have a lot to discuss, but the first thing I kind of love to get to know you a little bit. Tell me about. So, again, you've done quite a lot, as Robert's kind of displayed, and I'm curious a little bit about your testimony. Young adult years, highs and lows. How'd you get here?
if we wanted a deep dive with it, I grew up in inner city New Orleans. My dad pastored a mostly black church there. That's already pretty unique for a white kid. But it was this amazing heritage. And New Orleans was both beautiful and hard all at the same time. And so if I'm honest about my story now, which I think I have become a lot more honest about it in the last 10 years or so, I walked through what a therapist might call compound trauma and different things. And so that's been really formative in my story. And then in the dynamic of that, probably ebbed and flowed through marriage with a lot of highs and a lot of lows because of it. And our marriage has grown a lot over the years, but we're in a sweet spot now, a really sweet season now. And I think if Jen was here, she would say that. But all that to say, I had a mother and father that absolutely, authentically followed Jesus. And anyone was welcome around our table. And that was infectious. I think I grew up with this idea that we should welcome whoever wants to come and whoever is open to friendship and relationship. And so we did. That was just how our life was there in the inner city. And and then we were also connected to New Orleans Seminary. So there you've got a lot of folks that are like in this crazy transition and kind of wondering what's God doing in my life. And so we had that vibe of like, let's invite each other along on both sides. And that was very formative for not only my own personal thinking, but leadership thinking, church thinking, entrepreneurial thinking.
Yeah.
And so in that process, I kind of caught following Jesus more than it was ever, more than I was ever convinced of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me pushing a little bit, tell me about when you say compound trauma. Tell me what that means and a little bit more about your story, if that's okay with you.
I'm a lot more vulnerable about it nowadays than I ever have been, and so I don't mind sharing. 7 years old, out in the neighborhood like normal, and got preyed upon by someone who then I was sexually abused. And it turns out that not only did it happen multiple times with me, but it turned out that he had done it with other kids in the area. And about 4 months later, got arrested. And I was actually on the street corner with a group of people who were all, denigrating him. And although I'm sure his story has crazy issues that led him to even some of the activity that he had, I wasn't denigrating him necessarily. I was feeling more the shame and the worry of, should I ever talk about this? And so I didn't. And I think in the way that a psychiatrist would talk about it, it must have affected my development such that I just never quit. I never would stop long enough to sit in sadness. I would never stop long enough to even embrace that idea for me. I could do it with others. And so ministry, right, was a really good field, right? Because I could spend time with everyone else's issues and never face mine. And so growing up, and then saw a lot of crazy stuff. If anyone grew up in inner city New Orleans, they know what I'm talking about. But like, we had cars stolen out of our driveway. We had prisoners picked up twice out of our backyard. I've seen murders, people shot. I was at a parade and saw that one of my guys I played ball with all the time, his brother killed in a drug deal. Like, all this crazy stuff that most people would say was not normal kid growing up life, right? And in America, at least, not normal kid growing up life. And so it was, it's just all stuff that you just do survival mode. And so fast forward, been married for 11 years. And in 2009, I get a call late one night, and my mom and dad were out walking, and they get run over by a vehicle. And my mom ended up passing with a brain injury. And so my dad had to learn to walk again. It was kind of one of those crazy moments where I had to stop, because I had to stop everything I was doing, go live in New Orleans, and basically take care of them. And we were in Orlando at the time. Robert and Hal and I were conspiring on a lot of levels at the time, so he remembers that well. And had been around my dad a lot, even, who just actually passed in 23. But all that to say, that's when it began to hit me that it wasn't working anymore. What I had done to cope and survive and live, and how I had operated, and the fast pace I had kept, the capacity that I had been able to work at and even live at, both work and family balance, but never letting anyone close, not even my wife, never fully letting her into the suicidal thoughts I dealt with or the things in my head. And so that was amazing, because of the saint that she is. She was always like, I just want to get in. I want to be in your heart and head. And so it was in that moment in 2009, kind of from 2009 to 2013, where I kind of had to come to the grips with the fact that maybe I had swept something under the rug that I probably should go deal with. And so other things happened along the way, but I think I had to come to grips with the fact that having suicidal thoughts every day, ebbing and flowing out of deep darkness, while you've got all these people around you that love you deeply, and that wasn't normal, right? That I didn't have to keep living like that. So yeah, I mean that's part of the story that definitely has become very formative for me now.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm just curious, along that journey, from what you've said, I didn't get a hint that you were ever questioning God and His love. And I just know from my own personal experience amongst my own community that when you face those kind of troubles, where is God can be a predominant thought. And I'm wondering, was that the case for you?
It definitely was. I mean, and if I had to explain it to people, not to go all Trinitarian on us here, but I think for me, Jesus the eyes of Jesus have always been something that were meaningful to me. When I read in the Gospels that Peter caught Jesus's eyes after he denied him, and he weeps and he's sorrowful but becomes repentant. Judas never got to look back in his eyes, and we know what happened to him. I don't know why, maybe I'm misinterpreting that, but for whatever reason, for a long time, even back in middle school, I remember reading that and thinking, I just want to see his eyes, right? Mm-hmm. And so the eyes of Jesus and who Jesus is and being God with us, that's something I've never struggled to hold. What I have struggled to hold was more the Heavenly Father idea, not because I didn't have a loving Father, but I genuinely wondered, where the bleep are you, God, over and over again. And I would say even still to this day, Andrew Peterson has a song called Burning Edge of Dawn, and in the bridge he talks about the idea of when the King finally comes and getting to see him, meet him, and finally believing that the King has loved me all along. And that hits me hard, man. So I look ahead to that day when I know I'll get to see those eyes that I've always imagined, but I'll also get to see what the Father, Son, and Spirit and what they've invited us along into in this beautiful, intimate, good, and loving dance. Not safe, right? Which I think that's why stories like mine and even what Lucy asks Aslan, right, in Narnia, not safe, but definitely good. And I think I've had to come to grips with that. I mean, it's been a battle for a long time, and I don't know why. The Shack, which it was a controversial book, some people liked it, some people didn't, but it actually ministered to me big time because I was able to wrestle with what it meant to really relate with the Father in that way.
I definitely appreciate you sharing, and just know that, we have an audience of 8. I told you that before. But out of the 8, there's probably at least 4, that some part of that. So I'll misquote somebody else. I would give them credit, but I don't know their name. I have my stories, you have your stories. But if I tell my stories well, it'll make you think about your stories. So it's been Beckmanized. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
But when you tell your story, I can just imagine that there's people out there going, you know what? Until Duke said that, I never really thought about, why do I keep myself so crazy busy?
Yeah.
And ministry, you're right, it's a perfect alibi, right?
Yeah.
Perfect alibi. The other perfect alibi would be to start a coffee shop or do something entrepreneurial or to enlighten the world on blockchain, right? So all these things, and sometimes our most high-achieving people in our families and church families are actually, we've never really given them permission to go, hey, you know what, everyone's patting you on the back, you're getting a lot done, but have you ever thought about what it is that's driving you, man? And if it is, and maybe you're just, I'm not saying it's everybody. Not all stories fit everybody, right? But if it is a moment of reflection to make you kind of go, yeah, this isn't healthy. Or if you're married to someone and they're saying it isn't healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that we don't have to spend the whole time on it. You were kind to even ask about it. But on that point, I'll say, like in 2015, this was before I started therapy for all of that. And in 2015, one night, Jen and I were on a date, and she said, hey, I feel closer in our marriage right now than I ever have.
Wow.
And I think part of that was because I had actually begun to pause more, and because I had to, like it was beginning to be debilitating, if I'm honest, and didn't have the capacity that I had, or at least had probably falsely operated under. And I just said to her, I actually feel closer to you than I ever have, but I feel like I'm in a darker place right now than I ever have been.
Wow.
And I just said, I just need help. Like, can I
Yeah.
get help? And so in that moment, right, like even that relationship, which she had been so loyal and patient and encouraging, and our time here in Orlando with the church start, I think if we didn't have the level of community around us in that church start, and Robert knows the vibe of what our church was like, and I mean, it was profound relationships, and I think if I hadn't had that, I don't know if I would have made it. I really don't. Like, I think I was so surrounded by people that really lifted my arms up constantly and didn't even know how they had no idea how meaningful that was for me personally. And but looking back now, I can see it. And so, yeah, just sweet how the relationships around you who know you best, take the time.
Yeah.
That's what I would encourage people. Take the time. I think 21 Pilots has a song where they talk about, like, don't be afraid to feel dumb. Be that friend.
Yeah.
Be that friend that's willing.
God bless those friends, right?
Yeah,
Those
that's
kind
willing
of
to lean
friends,
in.
God
So,
bless them.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you do sharing, and I guess just internalizing it from my point of view. When I consider myself and my peers, I imagine there are plenty of times, and I'm not going to say that I'm the most self-aware, but I in fact, maybe I'm too self-aware, perhaps, as we joke about every now and then.
I see that hand out there.
I will ask people on occasion when they're going through hardships, like, how is this, how is that, and how are you feeling about this, and their lack of community has brought them to a place where they don't know how to articulate what they're saying or what they're feeling. And so what you see is anger, but behind the anger is an emotion that they don't know how to express.
Yeah.
And there's no community for them to try to express it. And man, that's a terrible crisis of isolation. And so it's meaningful to me to hear you say that a community that was invested in you didn't necessarily even know all the circumstances, but were willing to love you from what they did know. That to see that benefited you is uplifting for me.
Well, and one thing on that note, like the presence of the Lord, which you asked about a while ago, the presence of the Father. Looking back now, I can see how merciful it was of Him to remove me from that community when we left in 2013. And it was the removal from it that I think eventually made me realize that that anger had become contempt and had eventually become even a numbness. And that's when it got scary, right? Like, when it moved and progressed like that. And so the removal from that community when we exited and went to help in the other areas of the country where we went, it was in those moments where I began to realize, like, why that was so valuable. But also it opened up kind of a mirror for me to be able to say, okay, this is moving in a more dangerous place than it ever has. And then trying to find that community again, right? As you come to a new normal. And so it's a hard journey, but it's a worthwhile journey. And one thing Jen says to me a lot is, with tears in her eyes, is thank you. Thank you for being willing to take that journey, right? That journey of healing and to go through what we went through.
If that doesn't stir your heart, man, wow.
That's cool. And that might be a great place to riff upon, because anything else we do is sort of, so this idea of love and community. And it's like, hey, I don't care if you say you're planting a church. I don't care if you say you're going to start the next whatever.
Yeah.
But like at the heart of it all is that you touched on a few things of love and community. And then what you mentioned, I do think about so many people. It's like, do you know how impossible it is to ask someone to open up and talk about these things, and they don't have a community? So without the community, they're like, it's like you're asking them to speak some strange language that they've never encountered.
Yeah, that's true.
And I am fascinated, because I do remember that era when you departed and went to another place, and you mentioned that being like a grace of God. Yeah. That He chose to say, let me just explain how awesome community can be. Let me give you a season away from that community. Yeah. And then you go, oh my gosh. It's kind of like when things go well and you leave home as a young adult, and that's when you go, oh my gosh, my parents were awesome. Yeah. And the Lord's like, yeah, that's why I had to have you get out of the house.
Get out of it to see it.
Because now if you'd have stayed there and you think, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, if it's a loving community, doesn't He make me stay there forever? It's like, well, no, sometimes He helps you depart from it, and you're like, man, I never realized how awesome those people were. Well, and even just like the patience of, I'm envisioning those folks from that crowd loving you, and I'm just envisioning who else is out there who needs to be reminded, love people in your life, because you don't know all that's going on. Yeah. And you don't always get the whole story. But maybe fast forward 10 years, and that person's story is going to be those people loved me, and I never was able to even tell them all I was going through.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I'm still connected well with some of those people. And so even having the chance to tell them what that meant, and I've had the chance to do that now with about 6 or 8 of them, and face-to-face, one-on-one. And it's just been special. I mean, and you'll laugh at this. So you may remember when we were in 2012, I got offered a role in Montreal, Quebec, to go coach church starters there, and by NAM, and we were planning on moving to Montreal. Like it was, and growing up in New Orleans, they actually teach French in the public schools, and
It helps.
like
It
I
helps.
had it from 3rd to 11th grade, and so and so I was like, this is perfect, right? Like I'll get to go use French, I'll get to go.
It's like New Orleans of the North.
I know, but it's cleaner and a better infrastructure, right? So and the great music and food,
And
right?
less
It's the
clubs.
Same thing. Yeah, exactly. All so similar to New Orleans and yet different because there's only 10 murders a year there instead of 2 every day.
no.
So like all that to say, literally that was the statistics a few years ago. But all that to say, even that, my wife and I got this overwhelming sense of like, this isn't right. And I knew who they were going to offer the job to if I turned it down, which made me excited because I knew I could still partner with them up there, which we did for 6 years from 12 to 18. But like, I really think if I had gone there, I think I would have collapsed. I think I would have, I think I would have fallen through the floor. But how God pivoted that. Right, almost like saying you could do this if you want, but I think I would have removed myself from what I needed and just kept a fast pace and probably eventually collapsed. So it's just sweet. It's merciful of the Lord. Now we see that. At the time, that was another thing I was frustrated about.
If you and I were doing the math on God using strategic use of his prized sons and daughters, then the brain part of us would go, it's beautiful. It's a perfect match.
Yeah.
But God is more loving and kind than that. And he goes, no, we're going to need a season of this.
Yeah.
And that season ain't going to be having him up there working like a little worker bee, supposedly pushing the kingdom agenda,
Right.
but he's falling apart inside. I need to get so seasons come and go, right?
That's right.
So that's cool. That's cool.
I would love to. This seems like a really good segue into your book, Live Sent, which was actually my first introduction to you. When we do our young adults group, that was one of the first books that we had done, and it only seems fitting that basically what you're describing in the book is also kind of related to kind of what we're talking about, which is Live Sent. Actually, we're going to put it in the bio below this.
Paul's
in this
beautiful
YouTube.
at that.
Yeah, Paul's going to do it, and it's going to be good. So a link to his book. It's really good. Live Sent. You are a letter crafted by God for his messaging to his people and to certainly to people who don't yet believe. So
Any shout out you'd like to give on that book? I know for you've probably been asked it a million times, and you wrote it quite a few years ago, but
Yeah, make sure to
Live
get
Sent's got a lot of mileage, hasn't it?
It has gotten. I mean, I even had somebody, I think it was like 2 months ago, reach out still. Make sure to get the brown cover, not the white cover. The brown cover is second edition.
Oh, gotcha.
A little bit better, has better stories. I was able to recraft it. They have a Spanish edition even of that one.
Nice.
But yeah, I wrote in 2017 a small group study on it called Living Sent. And I'll send that free as a PDF if you want
Sure,
to put it
yeah.
in the show notes or a link to
Absolutely.
it in the notes. But that way you won't have to go to Amazon and try to find the other one. But the small group study was fun because I was able to even add in things with the John 17 prayer and other elements of what really forming community around Jesus looks like. And so, yeah, but thanks for even mentioning it. And it's been fun. It's been fun to encourage people with those stories.
So at the time, we did a conference. We called it Live Sent. And actually, I don't know if you remember this. You probably do, though. But we had a friend, mutual friend. Didn't they name their church Live Sent, right?
They did.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
cool.
And so
Wow.
if you gave there's the 30 second in the elevator, there's the 1 minute, and then there's the read the dang book, people. That's why I write a book. But if you gave the 30 second, what would you say? Any 2.0 revised versions of how you would say it in 30 seconds.
Yeah, the
why
30
people should definitely get this book.
The 30-second version is that the New Testament mentions the word church 140 plus times. Not one's a place or an event. And so the implication of that is that we are the church together. The word you in the New Testament is 92% plural. So even how we read the scriptures needs to probably be formed more around that idea. And then understanding that we don't go make disciples for Jesus, we make disciples with Jesus. And not only with Jesus, we make disciples with Jesus with others. And they may already be believers, they may not, but we invite them along into our lives, into these rhythms that he was redundant about with his followers. And the ones we pinpointed that he was so redundant about are table, Sabbath, and serving. And so if you invite along people around the table and into Sabbath with you, which most people don't even do Sabbath, and then into serving together, they'll probably taste the kingdom more than if you just invited them to a gathering or a Bible study.
That's worth the price of admission right there.
It is.
Table, Sabbath, and serving. By the way, the group that Thomas has been leading, big on Sabbath. We kind of had an emphasis on that, and I know Thomas and Annie, they practice that. Table, Sabbath, and serving. I do love that. But so his kids growing up, this whole idea of church isn't just this building that you're picturing. These are my church clothes. Is kind of like the riff on that, because it would be like, what are you wearing today? Are you going to church? You're like, we are the church. If I'm wearing clothes, then yes, these are my church clothes.
That's right.
And the other thing I thought about, it's funny how you remember little golden nuggets. I was at Disney not long ago, and on the monorail, this kid's touching every handrail and thing he can, right? And the dad, being a young foolish dad, let's be honest, I had to chuckle, is saying, hey, kiddo, don't touch everything. Don't touch everything. Don't touch everything. You're going to get germs. You're going to get germs. You're going to get germs.
Yeah.
And so Jason, I've heard him elaborate many times before, like the concept of we treat our culture that we live in almost like you ask your kids to treat a public restroom. Like you go in there to do what you got to do, and then you get out of there and don't touch anything, and the goal is not to catch any germs. And it's like, well, no, what if the church, meaning us, was meant to get into culture in the life that's messy and not be so worried about catching germs from people, but actually thinking in terms of, so any riff on that in terms of like living sent within the culture, whether it's you're supposed to redesign blockchain, or you're supposed to plant a church, or you're supposed to record another album?
Yeah, I think decentralization is key. I think decentralization is at the heart of who Jesus is, it's why I even fell in love with blockchain, if we eventually get to that topic.
That's next.
That idea, though, of a decentralized people, a decentralized church. I mean, for Jesus to say that to his followers the night before he died in John 14, that you will do greater things than me, that doesn't make any sense. Other than you actually will be in more places with more people, decentralized out, away from just being this holy huddle. And so it's challenging because it forces us to redefine abundant life. It forces us to redefine holiness. It forces us to redefine spiritual maturing. Like, what does that even mean? And so the idea that if I extract myself into this trajectory toward personal goodness, that might be the wrong trajectory. But if I engage myself into being able to even further and further understand and explain why I need the goodness of God to the culture around me, that might be what holiness actually looks more like, is a holy God who decided to put on flesh and dwell among us. And so that idea, right, I think, and my older kids especially, you mentioned the kids, it wrecked them a little bit. Like even our move when we ended up in Nashville, no offense to Nashville, because there's actually a lot of really sweet churches and healthy churches there, but they had to get used to Nashville church culture, which was nothing like what we had experienced here. And the reason is because it just wasn't as polished and centralized, right? And they were so used to that. And I think that idea of being out and about in the midst of culture, and now they're looking for it, which has been fun.
Now you got a son in the music industry, and he's living out that, being in that culture,
Yeah,
shaping
sweet.
that culture, being
Interesting.
part of that. That's very cool.
It's sweet.
Is he part of a group or recording or?
He's a producer.
Awesome.
Works with a lot of different artists.
That's fantastic. You know, I'm curious. Let's define some terms real fast, and this is a good thing to define because then it's gonna enter us into a larger conversation. Decentralized. Let's define that term.
Yeah, so you can define it a lot of different ways, but I would say basically the ability for multiple people to begin to take ownership of something. So like from a church perspective, if you think about it, any element of the church that's only centralized around one person or one group. No offense, by the way, I grew up in a Catholic town. So no offense to Catholics. I know plenty of Catholics that are followers of Jesus, and I'm not one of those Protestant guys that thinks that otherwise. So please hear that. So that's not a knock on the Pope.
They haven't cornered the market on
Exactly,
that error.
yeah.
Protestants error that same way.
Exactly. Yeah. That's not a knock on the Pope, by the way.
Yeah.
You know,
God bless
may
his-
he
yeah.
rest in
Bless
peace.
him.
And I think, but that idea, right, that the church or even anything is centralized around one person can become really dangerous. Even Jesus, right? I love John 13, how it starts when it says, John basically says that Jesus fully understood that all authority had been given to him, comma, and he disrobes, puts on a towel, and washes their feet. Like that's intentional. John doesn't just haphazardly say, the king of all things. like he doesn't haphazardly say it. So even he had this idea at the heart of who he was of this isn't just about me. And yet we all know it is, right? Like we know that the glory, I get that. But that's why Philippians 2 is so cool, right? He's saying, but he almost set that aside in order to be that humble servant. And
Interesting.
like how do you help more and more people own the kingdom of Jesus together? How do you help more and more people engage as though they now are taking ownership in it with you?
I see where you're getting the biblical lens from it because, okay, yeah, like though God is the central power, he's demonstrated his ability and his power through responsibility.
That's
So
right.
he's given humanity a responsibility to take care of the earth, to be fruitful, to multiply, take dominion. And so we all have a part to play. And I suppose if it were centralized, I guess I think of like the micromanager. Like, you're doing it wrong. I'm just gonna do it.
I'm just going to do it. That's right. That's
You
right.
want it done right, you got to do it yourself.
That's right. So,
Well, and it wrecks with people's theology, especially if they're pastors, to think that Jesus threw the keys to the kingdom to lost dudes. And most people don't want to reconcile with that idea. He had not resurrected yet. They had no full idea and understanding of what his messiahship or his being a savior and Lord actually meant in their life. And yet he tells them, go down and cast out that demon. Go serve that person. Go help that hurting person. Go preach the kingdom.
yeah.
Right? And it's like he was saying to them, I want you to learn the gospel of the kingdom and own it, even before you understand
That's
it.
no
when
longer call
Jesus
you-
gave them authority to cast out demons, and they it was kind of like a 3-day mission, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I no longer call you my little worker bees. I call
Yeah.
you're my brothers.
You're my
and-
brothers. You're my
yeah.
friends.
Yeah.
And inviting them. I mean, he gives us his name. That's a whole part of the soteriology of all of this. And I think the idea that we now get to have ownership with him in his kingdom. I
Yeah.
mean, that's central to Paul's writing.
I'm pivoting a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah.
How has that informed your philosophy for blockchain?
Good segue,
question.
by the way.
So-
Great segue.
So blockchain, at the heart of blockchain technology is decentralization, right?
Yeah.
If you're really honest about why people invented Bitcoin, it's because they were ticked off that banks, centralized banks, and centralized institutions were setting the standard for money and then making the most money on that money
That's right.
because they would hold it. They wouldn't move it along in the process. They wouldn't transfer it further until they made the most off of it. And if you don't have a lot of money, you kind of are ignorant of that whole system. The moment you enter in, even into the middle class, and you do anything in the banking system, like you start to realize, oh, I'm not really owning my money. Like,
I'm getting fleeced.
if I went to the bank and tried to pull all of it out, and all of us did that, we would never get all of
Ignorance
our money.
was
Right?
bliss.
Exactly.
Now I know
So-
what I don't know, and now I know that I don't have the keys, and you do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so,
Huh.
so the people who started Bitcoin, that tech really was what they were after. How do we
Right.
take back ownership of this and then create this distributed network where we can have peer-to-peer commerce and community? And
Interesting.
that idea is also at the heart of the church. Now, the other angle of it is that it's an empowering ethos to it, because those who are bankless and creditless, who most Americans can't relate with, because we have easy, like, when you go to college, you get 20. The first week you're in college, you get like 20 envelopes in the mail. You need this credit card, right? Like we have
But I don't
no
have a
idea.
job. That's okay.
Yeah,
Take
it's
credit
okay.
card.
You can have the credit card. But you have no idea that what it means to live in a bankless society or a creditless society.
So
And blockchain
yeah,
enables that.
That's really interesting. And follow me here and correct. Like, I have a fallacy. I know it's wrong, but I really want to play it through so
You're
we can figure
speaking
it
on
out.
behalf of Bitcoin rookies out there everywhere.
So, and this is both conversation. This is both topics kind of brought into one. So, I kind of gave this idea of a micromanager, but what you're describing is someone who wants the power so they have the control. And so, if I have the thing that you need to live, that means I get to dictate the terms in which you interact in your world.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is with decentralization is it allows us to have a peer-to-peer relationship. But when we enter it back into the theological conversation, it's like, okay, how is God not the bank? He controlled us and he set the rules for our reality. Is that not the same thing that the banks do? How is it different?
So it's different because of things like Philippians 2, because of things like John 13, because of things like, even when Paul explains the church, when he says, be subject to one another as we are in Christ. I mean, it's different because Jesus himself modeled that authority outside of relationship is not healthy at all. And in that sense, this idea, it's why, for example, in 1 Corinthians 15, right in the middle of Paul's train of thought, which Paul is one of those writers that like train car, and like you finally get back around to what his point is, right? But in 1 Corinthians 15, the whole point of the chapter is resurrection. But right in the middle of it, he pauses to say, and there will come a day when all authority will come back and be subject under his feet. What the evil one has done is created a centralized idea of conquest, of control, of power, and then duped all nations into that idea. And so whether it's at nations or institutions or anything else, that's what's happened. He even did it to Eve, right? If we process, if we zoom
At the
in,
micro level.
if we zoom into the micro level. And so I think in that idea of centralization, it actually has to do with now I have the ability to control. And like when you think about the global economy, which I took a deep dive on with a friend of mine who's a global economist from Scotland back 2 decades ago when he started mentoring me in it. And when most people are not even aware of how the global economy works and the fact that it has these micro pockets all throughout it that are a network of people, and it's a very small group of people that traditionally have had a lot of control. And that's what blockchain technology is pushing back against, and it's why the institutions were so afraid of it until they realized we could also make money on it, which is what's happening now.
Interesting.
That's good. That's a great summary.
So I guess what I'm hearing is if we are believing that centralization as demonstrated through the devil's deception on nations and armies and even in regard to the bank, we're actually falling for the trap that Satan has for us. But this you didn't exactly say this, I don't think, but I think this is maybe what you intend. This is what you intended is like the reason why our relationship with God is not the same as our relationship with a bank or a nation is because they're trying to remove all choices. God's actually providing you a choice.
Yeah, this gets at the heart, even philosophically, of why there was a tree in the center of the garden that could break everything anyway.
Yeah.
Right, and I think, because if you want to talk about what I've wrestled with the most, it's that question. Right, like when I think about my own story and what someone ended up victimizing me in, and I'm not playing the victim card there, I'm saying like someone became predatory in my life, right? And when I think about that, that's when I go back to the garden story and I go, why did you put the tree there? Like, but what you just said is at the heart of it. Jesus showed us the best picture of the Father we'll ever get. Paul says in 2 Corinthians. And like this idea that God himself would put on flesh and humble himself even to the point of death, become a humble servant, almost this wounded healer who is able to bend low and say, now I'm here to give you life and to lift you back up again and even raise you up from the death that has come to plague you. And that idea, right, that he would do that, that's why the gospel is so mysterious and powerful and transformative, because nothing else is that type of an oxymoronic juxtaposition type of kingdom, right? Nothing else displays
You and I would have never thought of
that way. No.
Wow. That's the references to who's in charge, and the God of the universe, the King of Kings.
Yeah.
And he chooses to lay it all down.
Yeah.
So that nobody would ever invent this stuff.
No.
Right.
Nobody would ever think to even try to invent this stuff.
No, even Paul, like that's why Paul was revolutionary, even though he gets highly criticized. And he did say some quirky things, but like he gets criticized for his statement about be subject to one another as you are in Christ.
Right.
Everybody wants to harp on the wives submit to your husband's part. They forget that verse 21 of that chapter is be subject to one another as we are in Christ. He's setting this stage of this is the only reason it works.
Right. That's right.
Right, this is the only way life works, is if you decide to be subject to one another as we are in Christ.
I don't want to harp on this too long because I know I really
But
want.
it's like
I really want to
a
get
needle in your brain.
It is, and so like okay, I'm all on board with that, and then I just hear the devil, the
naysayers out
the
there.
naysayers out there who would say, okay, yeah, God provides us a choice, heaven with harps or hell and fire. And so what kind of a choice is that? Okay, yeah, so you set the table and you say, I've given you a choice, but, really, why would you ever choose hell? And to that, I wonder what you might say to that, to either of you.
I'll let you go first, and then I'll pick it up from there.
Because it doesn't seem fair.
Although you should never follow a Renaissance man. But yeah, I'm curious. It's a great question. And what I think is hilarious is that each new generation thinks they're the first one to stump God.
To stumble into this.
Oh my gosh, 20-years today, they're so
Has no one ever thought about this?
Has no one thought?
I never thought about how it came across that way. I would like to apologize for my plan for all of the planets.
Yeah, it's interesting because, especially when you talk about. So to answer that question, you have to step back a little bit. So Paul, in Romans, actually uses trauma language when he talks about sin's effect on us, and you even see it in Romans 12 when he pivots into kind of the climax of the letter, and he says, "And so don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the what." Renewing of your mind. And even that,
rehealthing.
He has no idea, right, neurologically, the things that we now know, and pathologically that we now know of how the body keeps score and what the synapses of the brain do. And he had no idea of all of that, right? But in the process writes this statement that really is at the heart of this entire conversation, right? Because I think what we have to understand is the human narrative alone, outside of that cosmic narrative of Christ, and the evil one, who for whatever, we don't even fully understand why the evil one did what he did, right? But something's happening in that cosmic narrative that becomes the context of our story. If I'm only limited to the human narrative only, right? If I'm really just a humanist, is really in essence what it is. If I'm only limited to that narrative, then yes, it's incredibly unfair. This is about my performance, and it's if I make the right choice, I'll go to heaven, and if I don't, I'll go to hell, right?
Yeah.
But if I step back and I look at the cosmic narrative, it really changes that game, and so it makes more sense of why Jesus would say, all of a sudden, he tells them, yeah, the evil one came to steal, kill, and destroy, but I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And we have to almost step back and go, maybe you didn't give us a dualistic choice. Maybe the evil one is who duped us into thinking that way.
There you go. Oh, I like that. That's good.
And I think this idea of like we all want to say we believe the gospel, but usually when we dive deep into what here's another controversial statement. So people never, especially in Baptist world, never like to hear this, but everyone interprets truth through their emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's just
true.
reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so emotionally, if you've dealt with hardships in any way, shape, or form, you feel, right? That what you just asked, you feel the depth of how unfair this feels. And so it's not easy to hear if you have a 27-year-old husband, like someone that we walked with at one point, who died of cancer, and you hadn't even had your first child together yet, or my wife's cousin who recently lost her husband to a heart attack at 37. They have 2 kids under 2. Right? Like if you're in those situations, you don't even know where to put that. And so you just step back in that dualistic way of thinking and you go, God, like, what are you doing? And why in all of this death? Why was that choice there? Why was the tree there in this choice and death and the consequence, and all of these consequences that have now unfolded, and now we're feeling the weight of all of that. And I think there's something more going on than we even understand. And it's why Paul, in all of his great thinking, would call it a mystery. And we typically dissociate ourselves from that from that cosmic narrative, and we really probably should step back and think about the greater war that's going on and the effect that it's had on us. That it actually is probably similar to what's happening in war-torn countries, has created a trauma culture, and none of us can cognitively think the way we would have outside of that trauma culture.
That's good.
And so Jesus on the cross even hints at that and says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, the how much arrogance would it have to take to say, it's got to all make sense to me? And it's like, wow, okay, brother, let me know how that goes. Like, you use the word mystery. I love that. On the pastoral side, we can't pastor you through a podcast, but I would say that is a shout out to the myth that you will not dig the well before you get thirsty, and then you do lose someone who's 27 years old. And then you grab a local pastor by the throat and you want him to make it make sense in 2 sentences or less. And it's like, yeah, you probably should have spent some time with the Lord before this happened. That might have been a good idea. Because, by the way, that is, all of our stories are going to involve that, right? There's no world where you're going to live a myth world where you never encounter death, you never encounter horrible things that happen.
Yeah.
So it is part of the deal. I love you use the word mystery. I think Paul was very comfortable with it. We're not comfortable with the word mystery. We would like to button down everything. And Paul was quirky, but he was a genius, quirky man. And yet he's comfortable with that. We need to get comfortable with that. The other thing I think is interesting is the whole idea of it's either or. And time and again, the Lord is always correcting his disciples or the Pharisees or whoever, and he's saying, what makes you in your fallen, traumatized world think that it's either or?
Yeah,
have you been talking to the
his
evil
blindness is from his parents' sin or his sin, right?
Have you been talking to the accuser?
Sure.
Did the accuser whisper in your ear
right.
that it's door
That's
number
right.
1 or door number 2?
Yeah.
So in our broken world, we're not going to make sense of it. Our broken brains, our broken hearts. And then I think about how, let's say in your cerebral self, you're going to make sense of this. You are going to make it airtight and perfect. I'm going to solve this once and for all. Is it door number 1 or door number 2? And why would the Lord be so annoying as to make it so? But if you think about, do you really want to live in a world where you're able to explain to me why evil makes sense? Because it doesn't make sense. That's the whole point, right? So it's almost like we have such a desire to fix things or have a little soundbite that makes it make sense. And I would just say, well, the challenge is, you're right. I'm comfortable with living the fact that evil doesn't make sense to me. And you know what else? I don't ever want to live in a mind space where evil makes sense to me. Because it doesn't make sense.
No,
it's broken. It's a mess. And it should bother us.
It should.
Evil
bother us.
should bother us. It shouldn't be something that we solve.
And what you just said is so key. Like evil, brokenness, woundedness, pain, death, all of these things that are in the reality of this world. It's what should make us long deeply for resurrection. It's why resurrection matters, because resurrection doesn't fit the either or box. Resurrection doesn't fit the that's not fair box. Resurrection is like like no one saw it coming, right?
That's true.
Resurrection is this idea of well, this is not. I never intended. God never intended for us to live in a world where good and evil both existed. Go back to the Genesis 3 story, right? It says right there in the text, "Let us go down," which even that's this crazy Elohim of
Plural
Elohim
to plural.
stuff. Yeah. Like, watch the Bible Project videos on spiritual beings and it'll help a little bit. But like all that to say, he says, let us go down and let's remove them before they eat of the tree of life again, and this lasts forever. That's basically what the text says. It's this crazy, merciful idea of like, we need to put an expiration date on knowing good and evil, and then we'll resurrect. We'll resurrect what I originally intended. So then philosophically you go, yeah, but what about, like, why don't you just eradicate it? Right? Well, Jesus told a story on that in Matthew 13. He says, so the wheat was growing, and then the weeds grew up. Well, you should just take the weeds out. Well, yeah, but if you do, it tears all the weed up. Like, it destroys the whole thing. We have to let this play out to harvest.
Yeah.
But none of us want to hear that, right? I don't. I'm just being honest. Like, I don't want to hear that crap. What I want to hear you is fix it.
Fix it.
Right?
That's right.
Like fix it.
Even if I'm wheat, I want to be, let's fix it.
Fix it.
Well, Robert, you realize you'll get ripped to shreds.
You'll get ripped up too, right? So like in that sense, I think resurrection has to become something more than a concept to
That's
us.
really good. That's good.
And until you face hardship and hopelessness, resurrection probably doesn't matter that much to you.
It's optional. You wouldn't need it, right? It would be too much.
That's
So
very
yeah, if
interesting.
you and I can make sense, we say, well, I guess you really don't need the Lord himself. You definitely don't need a resurrection. You've got it all figured out.
Yeah, because Jesus' answer to that 27-year-old wife and to my wife's cousin isn't, you should have followed me better before, or don't you understand this, or this is just life. Yeah, deal with it. His answer is, I'm with you, and the resurrection's coming.
Yeah.
And his answer is, time and again, you see him coming down and joining them in that. So you and I are looking at him going, well, but wait, you're divine. You could snap fingers and fix it. And he's like, yeah, but what I chose to do was to be brokenhearted along with the brokenhearted.
Yeah.
So he time and again, I love the Trinity references, but you wonder what the Father's thinking. Well, Jesus tells you everything you need to know about the Father.
Clarifies.
He clarifies it. So what does Jesus himself do? He could have snapped his fingers, but all we do know is that he opts to come along us in brokenness, time and time again, even to weep for a friend that he knows he's going to resurrect
He's
from a
going to raise
grave.
from the dead. That's right.
But he's like,
that
no.
chapter is such a great
You know what you do at
summary of
funerals?
it.
You don't give people theological answers like pithy statements. You weep and you
weep
cry, and you say, he was my best friend. I miss him so. Right? And so he models for us, like, it's okay to just be broken alongside people.
Yep.
We don't have to have all the answers. The only answer that we have is, I don't know, but the Lord knows.
Yeah.
And the Lord's up to something. He's growing wheat and tares. And I do long for that resurrection, because until that, I'm not going to have all these answers.
Let me ask you this. This is, again, another pivot.
It's great.
Ooh, segue day.
This conversation is really good, and I want to at least spend a little bit of time on blockchain, Bitcoin, crypto. And
I agree.
I
Last little section.
I think so.
Let's do a Bitcoin.
So I really like how we've defined decentralized, the peer-to-peer. So anytime I have chats with my finance friends and cryptocurrency comes up, they say, "Oh, how much have you lost?" like the first thing they ask, and then obviously there's the statements of along like, "Hey, it's worth nothing until someone says it is worth something." It's not going to be legitimized until a country accepts it as their legal tender. So I guess my question would be, how invested are you in it? And
Sorry for snorting on a podcast. It's really unprofessional.
and despite the naysayers out there, as referred to previously, why is it important that we spend at least some amount of time investigating and investing in it?
And I think this is brilliant. I'll be the bridge in the middle. That's my generation. Because the way you perfectly articulated what most people are thinking. You definitely did a beautiful job. And I also know Duke's answer, which is going to be like a curveball from whoa. Duke's just heard me say, heard all of America say, I was wondering how you get filthy rich. and Duke's is like, we're talking blockchain. We're not talking finances, how to get rich overnight. So Duke's enlighten us on maybe the benefits of taking that question. And when we say blockchain, all the value and the benefits and almost the philosophy of life, that goes a little bit beyond how do I make a quick buck, or to our friend's point, not lose tons of bucks.
Yeah, it's interesting. Investing's all about timing, and what's unique about cryptocurrency, and for example, is that it's currency. It's not stock. It's not asset. And so it's a currency exchange ideology, and so people have typically lost a lot of money because they don't understand currency exchange. And the reality is very few people understand currency exchange because of what we talked about earlier. The banking systems have been the centralized authorities there. And so if you don't understand currency exchange, but you by luck happen to find one of those coins that you bought in at 0.0001 in exchange comparison to the dollar.
He knew the exact transaction rate you bought it at. That's
right.
He's a mind reader.
Like you bought in there and then all of a sudden it jumped to 19 cents.
Wow.
Right. And you're now a millionaire. Right. And I'm not kidding. I know people like that. And I was not one of them. But here's why. I didn't grow up until, even though that guy was mentoring me in the global economy and I knew he was filthy rich, the guy I mentioned earlier.
I remember him, by the way.
He's fantastic.
Very intriguing guy.
But even though I had been around him, no one had ever taught me you can make money on money, even if you just have $10. Right? No one had ever taught me that. And so it wasn't until 2019 that I really began to realize, I probably should have been, even if I could have just put $1 aside every month, I probably should have been figuring out and teaching my kids, right? No one ever taught me that. I was very late to that game, the investment game. And so I think I tried to invest in some silver ETF at one point and lost everything that I put in. It was like $200. I think it went to $90 or whatever, and then I forgot I even had it. So that was the only time I'd ever done it. But in 2019, I took a deep dive, and I think in that process, not only I had already been paying attention. Robert knows I've always kind of been labeled a bit of a futurist, and so I had been paying attention to crypto from 2011, 2012. I just never had bought in. I wish I had. There were certain coins I probably would have bought, and now I could fund all of that we want to do in Church Start. That didn't happen, but when people get the timing right, they typically get that quick buck. But that's not really the power of blockchain, right? It's powerful to certain people because they got the timing right in the currency exchange, and then they exchanged again. It's really not even correct technically to say sell. They exchanged again at the right time and got the USD, the dollars, the fiat dollars back. And so step back from that for a second and understand that at the heart of cryptocurrency was this idea that we could have commerce and community together without a central authority governing all of our finances and economy. That's the heart of it.
I see.
Right? And the heart of it, the heart of that same thing is right in the heart of the church, right? And so this idea, though, that I could get rich quick, yes, a lot of people have bought in, and then because they didn't understand the exchange concept, lost a lot. And so I think I was fortunate when I got in that we actually made money on stuff, and we were able to find things that were actually developing healthy technologies and all of that. And so we bought in, and we still have some. But Robert has known me for a while now, and I'm kind of one of those weird guys that wasn't I just want to get rich quick, although I would have been fine with that if I had stumbled into that. I wanted to figure out, how do you use this?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so we took a deep dive as a family. Like my wife and I made a commitment to it, even though I think she kind of just gingerly came along. I think she was more
Sure, fine, I'll
skeptical
go
than I
along.
was.
She want to be on the same page with you. Out of
But-
love, she goes along for the journey.
But I would say 21, 22, 23, I'm not making up this percentage. I would with confidence say that we paid at least 30 to 35% of our bills with crypto.
Really?
And I would say we made, for at least an 18-month period, I did not have an outside salary other than exchange and investments in crypto.
So does that mean you're physically paying it, or you're transacting it back into USD to paying your bills?
So good question. So Visa bought in before anyone knew they did.
Oh.
MasterCard bought in before anyone knew they did. And so we were able, even with certain debit type, crypto-based debit cards, to leverage our crypto. And so again, it's exchange. Just like when you go to a foreign country and buy something,
Yeah.
they have to deal with the exchange concept.
That's right.
Same thing. So the Visa allowed us, through its debit nature and its interaction between fiat and crypto, allowed for that exchange to occur. So we did that. But the thing I want to say that I think is so important is that blockchain technology, though, isn't just about crypto. We live in an age now with AI, and so to have ethical AI, you need authentication and verification. So imagine Mr. Beast, if anyone out there digs Mr. Beast, right? Like there was a scam video with Mr. Beast not too long ago, and people lost some money on the scam that they did because someone leveraged AI to make a Mr. Beast video that wasn't Mr. Beast, right?
Oh.
But if that had been made and then had to be based on the blockchain, you would have been able to go into it and
Verify.
see the authenticity or verification of who created it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in this world of ethical AI and the way that now all commerce and community is moving into the virtual space, and not even virtual reality, it's augmented reality. Like VR will be a thing of the past very soon. AR is where we're going, and it's this. It's glasses like this, not glasses like this.
Right.
And so it's that idea of being able to see through with both digital and physical world, and that's why crypto matters, because that's what will power the economy and community of that world.
That's fat. Yeah. So just to play on that a little bit, like, gosh, you see so many AI stuff, and it's kind of, sometimes it's easy to tell, sometimes it's kind of tricky to tell. There are people who are saying things that aren't true. So like, it's,
You might have family members that tried to date someone that didn't really exist. Hypothetically speaking.
it's all AI.
Just throwing it out
So like, but the AI is used to deceive. And what I appreciate about that is what you're saying is, it sounds like the gem behind crypto is the technology behind it, which is blockchain.
Yeah, totally.
And how does blockchain work?
So basically, if you can imagine, let's say we were, and I know this sounds rudimentary, but let's even go back to medieval times. We weren't as connected city to city as we are now, right? Like,
Yes.
So here you were, this rural community, but it was broader than just the few neighbors. Like it was just an expansive, whatever square miles it was, and all of these people who farmed and lived and worked in that rural community, they created an economy that was basically a micro or sub economy of the larger scale, right? You still had gold, you still had the larger scale concepts that kingdoms would exchange, but they had this micro economy. And all commerce and community was, my chickens make eggs, and you have some cows, and now we're going to exchange. Or, you do blacksmithing, and I needed X. Or I'm wearing shoes, and I've got the shoe. So I'm going to bring him, the latest, some really fresh goat milk from that morning, right?
Sure.
And I know that all sounds too simple and rudimentary, but that's really what cryptocurrency and why blockchain, that's what it really empowers and gives a base for, is the ability to have borderless community, so that currency is not defined by a government or a bank institution. It's the ability to have augmented reality and community and commerce in a borderless relationship.
Yeah.
Where now we can exchange something in currency the way that we did back in those times when multiple things were currency, even though we didn't call
Yeah.
it that. Multiple things had value. So what crypto does is it allows us in the augmented reality world it empowers. Blockchain becomes the base for all things augmented reality, right? And because of it, now I can exchange money, I can exchange other elements of value, data, I can exchange any element of what drives community. It's happening with X, by the way. I'm not trying to tell you I'm in on the backside of what Elon's doing, but like with X, for example, if you remember when he tried to set up X Bank and then he did PayPal and all that, like this was back in the
Yeah,
day,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, but all along he has had an understanding that I think is really intriguing, that commerce and community should happen together.
Interesting.
And so where X is going is you're going to find a micro community there. Facebook already tried to do it and Congress shut it down. Remember when they tried to start their own currency a few years ago?
Didn't quite understand it, so they
Shut it down
hated
because
it.
they realized, oh my goodness, this is about to be the most significant I don't remember what they had at the time. It was like 2.5 billion users. But you imagine that. So all of a sudden now, 2.5 billion users who live in digital reality are about to have their own economy. That becomes the largest
Yeah.
economy on earth.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So Congress all of a sudden goes, yeah, we're down.
right.
So
This can't happen.
So like that's why it's really been fun to watch true decentralization. So instead of one person rising up like that and saying, I'm going to now control whatever the currency is of this community, we're going to create multiple currencies among multiple distributed networks. And so how the blockchain works is it's that community living in a digital space, a distributed network, and then we validate each other's transactions together. And then we validate, that'll be really loud on the thing. So we validate each other's transactions and activity together, and it becomes a block on that ledger, which is a digital ledger, and then it can never be erased. And then the next block gets built, the next block, and you've got this now distributed. It's a bit of a hive type thing. The best blockchains now are kind of hive structured.
I see.
And so like it creates this hive structure that permanently exists as a digital ledger that validates all transactions in commerce and community.
So all those biggest fears of when we say artificial, the A in any A, couple that with this accountability, and you're like, wait, they need each other.
That's exactly
And then
right.
all of a sudden, the thing that you feared the most is actually like, no, we're talking about accountability. You used that word accountability, but we're talking about real accountability because, like, literally, you can't rig the system.
You're right.
No.
right.
It's very clear.
Because multiple people now have ownership. And that's the
Right.
key. And so it's why I think blockchain can be so powerful even for the local church, because what if you actually put your money where your mouth was? What if you preached from the pulpit, for example, that we should be decentralized and this is about you in everyday life, and you should be in community that serves and eats at the table and has Sabbath together, for example. But you never provide an economy for them to do that.
Right.
Interesting.
You've limited them. They're consistently looking back to a central figure and a central budget. What if you said, everything you guys give into the offerings, we're going to put half of it back into this basically what's called a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. We're going to put it back into this economy that you then together get to govern.
Right.
So like your small group, every small group now, because of all that you gave, it's really we actually have a moment in history where we could potentially empower what Acts 2-4 describes. And,
You didn't
and
see
we've
that
never
coming
had
when
that.
you asked,
I
"What's
didn't.
the benefit of blockchain?" You didn't see that coming.
I didn't.
Did you?
So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm trying. I don't mean to be political, but this could work either way.
Oh boy.
It can work either way. So no one should be mad. So every transaction we do in USD or any other nationally recognized currency is tracked and traced. It's taxed and plotted. And then at the high levels on the political realm, like this is what we see happening in our government right now. And you can choose whatever party you want because both are guilty of it.
Sure.
You don't know where all the money is. You don't know where it's going, but you know every cent that you've ever spent has been tracked and people are watching it.
Yep.
And that can be very frustrating. What I hear you say is with this technology, it's not centralized, so it's not hyper fixated, it's not hyper taxed. It is something that is between me and you, and there is the accountability. Every single crypto that is using that blockchain technology is traceable and trackable.
Yeah.
And so there's, like you said, hyper accountability and transparency, and it's still the peer-to-peer level. Is that a good summation?
No, that's a great summation, and it's really delightful to have this conversation, not only because I know how intelligent he is, and I've discerned through this how intelligent you are, and it's really fun to have a conversation around this with someone that's trying to really grasp it, and I appreciate that. But what you just summarized is exactly it. And I think it's what originally scared those centralized institutions.
Yeah.
Was they began to realize if we let this happen, which, by the way, the tipping point has already occurred. Most people don't realize that. But in 2021,
yeah.
the Ethereum blockchain moved more money than Visa.
Really?
So look it up. You can verify that. However ChatGPT or Google or your grandma, however you like to verify that. But like that tipping point has already occurred. And so the reality now is, how do we on macro and micro levels, how do we really look to empower economies that actually empower people to do what they do? And that's why it has such great implications on the local church.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jason Dukes.
Yes. This has
Thank
been
you.
great.
To be continued.